The station wasn't supposed to shake like this. Ethan Vale tightened his grip on the corridor rail as the artificial gravity stuttered again, the floor tilting just enough to turn every step into a calculated risk. Warning lights pulsed along the walls, bathing the steel corridor in intermittent crimson. Somewhere deep within the station's core, stabilizers were failing, and failing fast. "Gravity fluctuation in Sector 9, a voice barked over the comms. "All engineering personnel reroute now." Ethan didn't answer. He was already moving. His boots magnetized and released in uneven rhythm as he pushed forward through the crowded corridor. Humans, Kelith, Varani, species blurred together in the chaos, all reacting differently to the same invisible threat. Panic showed itself in loud voices, rushed movements, sharp breathing, except for her. He noticed her because she wasn't rushing. She stood near the corridor wall, balanced effortlessly despite the shifting gravity, one hand lightly resting against the steel as if the station's instability was little more than a mild inconvenience. Her presence cut through the noise, not loud, not commanding, just precise. Tall, poised, alien in a way that made the word alien feel insufficient. Her armor-like suit was dark, seamless, reflective, molded to her frame with deliberate elegance rather than decoration. Pale blonde hair fell loosely around her shoulders, soft against the cold geometry of metal and light. When the emergency lights flashed, her eyes caught them, bright, almost luminous blue, focused and alert. Ethan looked away immediately. "Don't stare," he told himself, already moving past her. The station lurched harder this time. Gravity inverted for less than a second, just long enough. Ethan's boots lost their hold. His balance vanished. Momentum carried him sideways, his shoulder slamming toward the wall as his instincts kicked in. He reached out. His hand didn't hit metal. It met warmth. Firm, unmistakably real beneath the smooth fabric of her suit. The contact lasted a heartbeat. 1 second, too long. Ethan jerked his hand back as if burned, horror flooding him faster than the gravity returned. His face went hot, his stomach dropping somewhere between shame and panic. "Oh God, I'm sorry," he stammered, words colliding. "Gravity shift, I didn't mean to, I lost my balance, I swear." He braced for the worst, for anger, for accusation, for a sharp reprimand delivered in a language he didn't understand but would somehow still feel. She turned toward him slowly. The alarms continued screaming. Crew members rushed past them, shoving, shouting, barely noticing the two figures frozen in the corridor. Her gaze met his. She was smiling. Not a teasing smile, not indulgent, not offended, curious. Ethan's brain stalled. "You're human," she said calmly, her voice smooth and controlled, cutting through the noise without needing volume. "Yes," he managed. Ethan Vale, Environmental Systems, I really didn't." "I know," she said, lifting one finger slightly. Not a command, just a gentle interruption. "Your intent was very clear." That made no sense. Before he could ask what she meant, her eyes narrowed just slightly, as if focusing inward rather than on him. She looked thoughtful, almost fascinated. "That was unexpected," she murmured. Another announcement crackled overhead. "Gravity stabilization in progress. Clear central access routes immediately." Ethan swallowed. "I have to go. Regulators are in Section C." She stepped aside without hesitation, granting him space. Then, as he passed, she spoke again. "Find me after the station stabilizes." He slowed, turning back. "Why?" Her smile returned, subtle, controlled, but undeniably real. "Because when you touched me," she said softly, "I felt something I've never felt before." She pressed a small data tag into his palm. Her fingers were cool, precise, and for a brief, disorienting moment, a faint sensation rippled up his arm. Not pain, not pleasure, recognition. Then she was gone, moving smoothly into the chaos as if it parted for her. Ethan stood there for half a second too long, alarms blaring, heart racing, staring at the data tag in his hand. The station shook again. He swore under his breath and ran, toward failing systems, unanswered questions, and the strange certainty that something important had just begun. Stability returned in increments, not all at once. Ethan felt it first in his boots, the magnetic pull smoothing out, the floor settling into something that resembled down again. Then the alarms dulled, their shrill urgency fading into intermittent status chimes. By the time he reached Section C, the station was no longer fighting itself, just groaning in exhausted protest. He worked on instinct. Panels open, diagnostics pulled, manual overrides engaged with hands that moved faster than his thoughts. He'd done this 100 times before. Gravity regulators were temperamental by nature, but today his focus kept fracturing, splintering back to a single moment in the corridor. When you touched me, I felt something. He shook his head and forced himself back into the present. There was a harmonic imbalance in the secondary field coils, a feedback loop that hadn't shut down properly when the surge hit. He rerouted power, recalibrated the phase alignment, and restarted the primary stabilizer. The station exhaled. A low, resonant hum spread through the structure as gravity locked back into place. Tools settled. Loose cables stopped drifting. Somewhere, someone cheered. Ethan leaned back against the bulkhead, sweat cooling on his skin, pulse still elevated. But now he couldn't tell how much of that was adrenaline and how much was her. 4 hours later, he finally made it back to his quarters. He dropped his tool bag by the door and stood there for a moment, staring at nothing. His body ached. His mind refused to slow down. He pulled the data tag from his pocket, turning it over between his fingers. Unmarked. No security seal. No visible encryption band. Definitely not standard procedure, he thought. The tag chimed softly as it synced with his console. Dr. Aaron Kale, Velari Cognitive Research Division. Requesting personal meeting. Location, Observation Deck 4. Time at your convenience. He exhaled slowly. So she's real, he muttered to the empty room. Ethan showered longer than necessary, scrubbing away grease, coolant residue, and unsuccessfully, the lingering sensation of her touch. He changed into a clean jumpsuit, hesitated, then changed again. Neither option felt appropriate. Observation Deck 4 sat at the edge of the station, a long curved viewport opening directly into space. The lights were dimmed, the stars sharp and endless beyond the glass. No crowds, no alarms. Just the quiet hum of systems doing what they were supposed to do. She was already there. Aaron Kale stood with her back to him, hands clasped behind her, posture straight but not rigid. Without the emergency lighting, her suit revealed subtler details, fine lines of integrated technology, faint reflections like distant constellations across its surface. Her hair caught the starlight, pale and almost luminous. "You came," she said without turning. "Yes," Ethan replied, stopping a few steps inside the deck. "I wasn't sure if I should." She turned then, and the smile he remembered from the corridor softened into something quieter, more deliberate. "I wouldn't have asked if this weren't important," she said, "to both of us." Ethan swallowed. "You said you felt something." "Yes." She approached, not close enough to touch, but near enough that he felt the shift in the space between them. Not threatening, intentional. "My species is empathic," Aaron continued, "but not in the way humans tend to imagine. We do not read thoughts. We do not invade memories. Through physical contact, we perceive emotional states. Their structure, their intensity." He frowned slightly. "Like feelings." "Like patterns," she corrected. "Most species project one dominant emotional state at any given moment. Fear, pride, anger, curiosity. Some can manage two briefly. They are simple, clean." Her gaze locked onto his. "When you touched me, I perceived at least 5. Ethan let out a quiet, incredulous laugh. "That doesn't sound special. That sounds like stress." "For you," she said. "For us, it is unheard of." She hesitated, then extended her hand, not touching him, just offering it. "May I show you?" His heart rate ticked up again. He glanced at her hand, then back to her eyes. There was no pressure there, no demand. "Okay," he said finally. He placed his hand in hers. The sensation returned immediately, stronger than before. Not a shock, not a jolt, but a resonance like two frequencies aligning. Erin's breath caught almost imperceptibly, her eyes closed. "Oh," she whispered. Ethan felt exposed in a way he didn't have words for. "Caution," she said softly. "Embarrassment, residual guilt, determination, and curiosity all active, all overlapping." She opened her eyes slowly, looking at him as if he were something newly discovered. "You don't experience emotions in sequence," she said. "You experience them together." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. He'd spent most of his life feeling like his emotions were badly organized, messy, contradictory, impossible to sort. Hearing her describe them like this didn't make them cleaner, but it made them seen. Erin released his hand gently, as if aware of how much the contact mattered. "I want to understand this," she said, "and if you're willing, I'd like your help." Outside the viewport, a distant star flared softly. Ethan looked at it, then back at her and nodded. "Yeah," he said quietly, "I think I do too." They didn't touch again right away. That, Ethan noticed, was deliberate. Erin moved first, stepping back toward the center of the observation deck, giving the moment space to breathe. The stars outside continued their silent drift, uncaring, ancient. The station hummed steadily beneath their feet, no alarms, no tremors, normalcy restored. "So," Ethan said, breaking the silence, "you felt what exactly?" Erin folded her hands in front of her, the gesture precise but not rigid. "Emotional architecture," she replied. "Structure, density, interference patterns." She paused, then added more simply, "how your feelings coexist." He exhaled slowly. "Most days, it feels like they don't coexist so much as argue." That earned a faint smile. "Yes, I sense that too." She gestured toward one of the seats lining the viewport. "May we sit? This is easier to explain without standing between galaxies." They sat side by side, not touching, but close enough that Ethan was aware of her presence in a way that had nothing to do with proximity. He noticed details now, the faint shimmer in her eyes when she focused, the way her breathing stayed controlled even when her expression suggested curiosity. "For most species," Erin began, "emotions function like signals. One activates the other's quiet, fear overrides joy, pride suppresses doubt. The internal experience is orderly." "That sounds nice," Ethan muttered. "It is efficient," she said, "but limited." She turned her head slightly to look at him. "Your emotional state in the corridor was not chaotic in the way we define chaos. It was layered, integrated. Each emotion informed the others rather than canceling them out." He frowned. "I was terrified I'd offended you." "Yes, and you were also concerned about station safety, and embarrassed, and focused on your duty and curious about me." She tilted her head. "Those emotions did not compete. They harmonized." "Harmonized," Ethan repeated. "It felt more like a mess." "Messy things can still be meaningful," she said quietly. That landed harder than he expected. Erin continued, "When Velari perceive emotions, we are trained to categorize them immediately. Label, record, move on, but with you, categorization failed. The moment I tried to isolate one feeling, another altered it." She hesitated, something like uncertainty flickering across her features. It was disorienting. "I'm sorry," he said automatically. Her gaze snapped back to him, sharper now. "Why?" He shrugged. "Sounds uncomfortable." It was, she admitted. And yet, she stopped herself, fingers tightening briefly before relaxing again. "And yet I wanted to understand it." Silence stretched between them. Ethan leaned back slightly, staring out at the stars. "You said most species don't feel like this." "No," Erin said. "Some feel deeply, some feel intensely. But very few feel, contradictorily, without fragmentation." He glanced at her. "Fragmentation. Emotional overload," she explained. "When incompatible feelings occur simultaneously, most nervous systems shut one down. Or they break. And humans," she met his eyes, "you adapt." That word echoed in his mind. Adapt. He thought of every time he'd felt proud and terrified at once, every goodbye that had hurt and felt necessary, every decision he'd made knowing it would cost him something and doing it anyway. "I don't know if that's a strength," he said quietly. Aaron studied him longer this time. I believe it might be, but belief is not data. He huffed a small laugh. Figures. She reached into a compartment at her side and withdrew a slim data pad, holding it but not activating it. If you consent, I would like to conduct structured sessions. Controlled contact. No surprises. We would map your emotional responses to different memories, stimuli, situations. And this would tell you what? If your emotional structure is unique to you, she said, or fundamental to your species. Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. You want to study humans, he said. I want to understand them, Aaron corrected. And you are the first human who has ever allowed me to truly perceive one. He considered that. Being first came with weight, expectations, risks. What happens if you're right, he asked, if humans really are built like this? Her answer came without hesitation. Then much of the galaxy has misunderstood you. Ethan let out a slow breath. That tracks. She watched him carefully. You don't have to agree now, or at all. This must be voluntary. Emotional exposure without consent would be unethical. He appreciated that, more than he expected. After a moment he nodded. Okay, we try carefully. Aaron's composure cracked just slightly, just enough to reveal genuine excitement beneath it. Thank you, she said, truly. As they stood to leave, Ethan realized something unsettling. He wasn't agreeing because of curiosity alone. He was agreeing because, for the first time in a long while, someone had looked at the mess inside him and seen structure instead of weakness. And that felt dangerous and important. Their first session took place 2 days later, not in a laboratory, not in a medical bay. Aaron insisted on a space that felt neutral, neither hers nor his. They settled on a small auxiliary observation room adjacent to Deck 4, rarely used, its viewport angled toward a quiet stretch of stars. The lighting was soft, adjustable. No recording drones hovered in the corners. No observers waited behind glass. Only them. Ethan arrived early, nerves humming beneath his skin. He'd expected to feel watched, evaluated. Instead, the room felt almost calm. Aaron entered moments later, carrying only her data pad and an expression that balanced professionalism with something more tentative. Before we begin, she said, setting the pad aside without activating it, there are boundaries we should establish. He nodded. I was hoping you'd say that. No contact without consent, she continued. At any point, you may stop the session. No data will be shared beyond my private working notes unless you approve it later. And if something becomes overwhelming. I say so, Ethan finished. Yes. That helped. They sat across from each other at first, a small table between them. Aaron didn't reach for him immediately. Instead, she studied him with a softer focus than before, as if recalibrating how she saw him, not as an anomaly, but as a person choosing to be here. Let's start without touch, she said. Tell me how you're feeling right now. Ethan blinked. Right now. Yes, not what you think you should feel, what you actually feel. He frowned, searching inward. Nervous, curious. A little stupid for agreeing to this. Also weirdly calm. Aaron's eyes brightened. 4 emotional states identified within seconds, she said quietly. Thank you. That was fast, he muttered. She smiled faintly. For you, perhaps. For me, it confirms a pattern. After a moment, she extended her hand again, palm up, but stopped halfway. May I? He hesitated only briefly, before placing his hand in hers. The resonance returned instantly, stronger now that he expected it. Aaron inhaled sharply, eyes closing as her posture shifted, not collapsing, not stiffening, but focusing, like someone tuning an instrument by ear. There, she murmured. Anticipation layered over restraint. Trust tempered by caution, a baseline of self-doubt but not dominant. Ethan swallowed. You're really feeling all that? Yes, her grip tightened just slightly, and something else. He tensed. What? She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. You're trying to make this easy for me. You're prioritizing my comfort over your own uncertainty. He blinked. I mean. You didn't decide it consciously, she said gently, but it's there. That hit closer than he liked. Aaron released his hand after a few seconds, giving him space again. "Let's try a memory," she said. "Something small, neutral." "Neutral?" Ethan echoed. "Yes, not joy, not pain, something ordinary." He considered that. Ordinary memories didn't usually get airtime in his head, but one surfaced anyway. "Morning shifts," he said slowly. "Back on Earth, before I joined the Corps, I used to work maintenance at a coastal facility. Early mornings. Coffee tasted terrible. Ocean smelled like salt and fuel." Aaron reached for his hand again, this time more confidently. Her breath stuttered. "I feel comfort," she said, surprised. "Routine, mild dissatisfaction. And underneath it," she frowned slightly, "a sense of impending departure, even though this memory isn't about leaving." Ethan's throat tightened. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I knew I wouldn't stay there forever." She looked at him with something like awe. "You carry future loss inside present moments." "That sounds unhealthy," he said weakly. "It sounds human," she replied. As the session continued, Aaron took minimal notes, clearly more focused on the experience itself. She guided him through other small recollections, choosing his first off-world posting, standing in line at a spaceport, watching a transport lift off without him on board. Each time, the same thing happened. No single emotion dominated. Hope braided with fear, excitement tangled with guilt, relief shadowed by longing. When the session ended, both of them were quiet. Aaron broke the silence first. "This isn't just data," she said slowly. "It's perspective." Ethan leaned back in his chair, suddenly exhausted. "You okay?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, but I need to recalibrate some assumptions." He smiled faintly. "Welcome to the club." As he stood to leave, Aaron spoke again, more softly this time. "Ethan." He turned. "Thank you for trusting me," she said. He hadn't expected that to matter so much, but it did. By the third session, the awkwardness was gone. Not erased, just transformed into something quieter, more manageable. A familiarity had settled between them, not casual, not intimate, but steady, predictable in the best way. Ethan found himself looking forward to the meetings, marking the hours until his shift ended, not because of the research, but because of the space it gave him to exist without performing. Aaron noticed the change before he did. "You're less guarded," she observed as they settled into their seats. "Your emotional baseline has shifted since our first session." "That good or bad?" Ethan asked. "Neither," she said, honest. This time, she didn't ask before taking his hand. She paused, fingers hovering just above his skin, then looked at him, really looked at him. "Is that acceptable?" she asked. "Yes," he replied without hesitation. When their hands met, the resonance was immediate, familiar now, less startling. Still profound. Aaron exhaled slowly. "There's trust here," she said. "Not absolute, but growing." Ethan chuckled softly. "Guess I'm getting used to you poking around in my head." "I don't poke," she said, mock-offended. "I listen." She guided him gently this time. "Think of something that makes you feel capable." "That's vague," he said. "Good." The memory surfaced unexpectedly. He was 22, standing alone in a maintenance crawlspace during his first deep space assignment. The ship had lost environmental pressure in one wing. Everyone else was rerouting systems from the outside. He'd volunteered to go in alone, tight space, limited oxygen, no guarantee the seal would hold. He remembered the silence, the weight of responsibility, the steadying rhythm of his own breathing as he worked. Aaron's grip tightened. "There," she whispered. "Confidence, but not arrogance, fear, but not paralysis, responsibility layered over self-doubt." She opened her eyes. "You didn't believe you were the best choice. You believed you were the one available." Ethan swallowed. Someone had to do it. "Yes," she said softly, "and you accepted that." They sat in silence for a moment after she released his hand. Aaron broke it hesitantly. "May I ask you something personal?" He nodded. "Fair's fair." "Why do you minimize yourself?" she asked. He blinked. "I don't." "You do," she said gently. "You frame your actions as necessity, coincidence, accident. You downplay intention, even now." Ethan leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Because if I don't, it feels like tempting fate. Her brow furrowed. Explain. If I admit something matters, he said slowly, then losing it would hurt more. So I tell myself it's no big deal, that I'm replaceable, that what I do isn't special. Aaron listened in silence. That's a survival strategy, she said eventually, not a truth. He laughed quietly. Feels like truth. She reached for his hand again, slower this time, deliberate. No, she said. Truth feels stable, this feels practiced. Something shifted in her expression then. Not excitement, not curiosity, concern. When she closed her eyes this time, her breathing was uneven. I'm sensing something unfamiliar, she said quietly. Ethan's pulse spiked. What? She opened her eyes, and for the first time since he'd met her, uncertainty flickered openly across her face. Resonance, she said, but not from you. He frowned. From you. Yes. She pulled her hand back slightly, as if startled by the realization. Your emotional structure is provoking responses in mine. That sounds bad. I don't know if it is, she admitted. Velari are trained to suppress emotional feedback. We perceive, but we do not absorb. And now I'm experiencing something alongside your emotions, not mirroring, not imitation. She hesitated. Recognition. The word hung between them. Ethan didn't reach for her this time. He let the space remain, respected the weight of what she just said. Does that scare you? He asked. Yes, Aaron said honestly, and no. She straightened, visibly recentering herself. This changes the nature of our work. I need to proceed carefully. He nodded. So do we stop? She met his eyes. No, she said, but we acknowledge that this is no longer one-directional. Silence settled again, thicker now, charged with something neither of them was ready to name. Outside the viewport, a distant star pulsed softly. Ethan realized something then. Whatever they'd started, it was no longer just about understanding humans. It was about what happens when understanding goes both ways. The fourth session never officially began. They arrived at the room out of habit, same time, same place, but something in the air felt different, thicker, as if the space itself remembered what had been said there before and was holding its breath. Aaron didn't activate her data pad. Ethan noticed immediately. You're not recording, he said. No, she replied. What happens today shouldn't be reduced to metrics. That made his stomach tighten. Is that a good thing? It's an honest thing, she said, then paused. If you're still willing. He nodded. I am. They sat closer than usual this time. No table between them. The stars beyond the viewport seemed dimmer, as if the room itself had become the focal point of gravity. Aaron inhaled slowly. I need to try something different, she said. I won't guide you. I won't analyze first. I'll simply allow. Allow what? She looked at him, and for the first time there was no professional distance in her gaze. Only vulnerability, raw and unfamiliar. My own response. She extended her hand. Ethan took it. The sensation surged instantly, stronger, deeper, layered in ways that made his chest tighten. But this time something pushed back. Not resistance, presence. Aaron gasped softly. Her composure fractured, not dramatically, not explosively, but in quiet, terrifying increments. Her shoulders tensed. Her breathing lost its rhythm. I feel, she began, then stopped, clearly struggling to find the words. This is disordered. Ethan didn't pull away. He adjusted his grip slightly, grounding rather than restraining. You don't have to name it, he said gently. Just stay with it. Her eyes fluttered shut. I was trained to suppress this, she whispered, to redirect, to flatten. And now it's too much and not enough at the same time. Tears welled, not streaming, just present, suspended at the edge of something she'd never permitted herself to feel. Loneliness. It struck him not as a sensation he felt, but one he recognized, familiar in shape, devastating in intensity. Her loneliness wasn't sharp like his had been after loss. It was vast, empty, a long, quiet absence where connection should have lived. I've perceived thousands of minds, she said, voice breaking. But I've never been seen. Ethan's throat tightened. You are now, he said simply. Her grip tightened not in desperation but in confirmation. Something in her settled, not resolved, not fixed, acknowledged. They stayed that way for a long time. No data, no structure. Just shared presence, messy, unfiltered, human in the way she was only beginning to understand. When she finally opened her eyes, they were clear but altered, softer, changed. This can't remain private, she said quietly. Ethan's pulse quickened. You want to report it? Yes, she said, but not this. She gestured vaguely between them. The implications, the architecture. Humans don't just experience emotional complexity, you integrate it. He frowned, and that matters because the galaxy has been translating feelings incorrectly, she said, conviction returning to her voice. We treat emotions as singular signals when they're not, especially not yours. She leaned forward, intensity building. Human emotional structure could serve as a bridge, an interpretive layer between species who cannot understand one another's internal states. Ethan stared at her. You're saying my emotional mess could be useful. I'm saying it could be transformative. Silence stretched. And what does that make me? He asked quietly. A case study. Her expression softened. A collaborator. That word landed differently. Outside the viewport, the station drifted onward, unaware that something fundamental had shifted within its walls. Not just between species, but between two individuals who had crossed a line neither of them had planned to approach, and couldn't unsee now that they had. The meeting with command was scheduled for the following cycle. Aaron informed Ethan with careful neutrality, as if the words themselves carried weight that needed to be set down gently. They want a preliminary briefing, she said. Not a formal proposal, yet. Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed loosely. Yet is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Yes, she agreed, it always does. The auxiliary observation room felt smaller than it had before. Or maybe he was simply more aware of how much had changed within it. What had started as curiosity had become momentum, quiet, undeniable, and moving faster than either of them had anticipated. Are you okay with this? Aaron asked. Truly, this won't stay small. He didn't answer right away. Ethan thought about anonymity, how comforting it had been to be just another technician, responsible for systems but not outcomes that echoed beyond steel corridors. He thought about his emotions, the way he'd spent years treating them like excess weight, something to manage rather than trust. And he thought about her, about the moment her composure had cracked not from overload but from recognition. I don't want to be used, he said finally. Aaron nodded once. Nor do I. I don't want pieces of me taken out of context and turned into some idealized model of human emotion, he continued. I'm not a template. I'm just me. She stepped closer, stopping a respectful distance away. That's precisely why this matters, she said. I don't want to abstract you. I want to show them that emotional complexity isn't something to be simplified. It's something to be respected. He searched her face for signs of ambition masquerading as conviction, found none. And if they say no, he asked. Then we return to this room, she said softly, and the station continues on its way unchanged. Something about that answer steadied him. Okay, he said, we tell the truth, carefully. The briefing room was larger than Ethan expected. Not imposing but formal, clean lines, multi-species seating, a curved hollow display dormant at the center. Command staff filtered in gradually, officers, researchers, diplomatic liaisons. Some glanced at Ethan with idle curiosity. Others barely noticed him at all. Aaron stood at the front, not rigid, not distant, present. She began with fundamentals. Velari empathic perception, established research historical limitations. Then she introduced the anomaly. Not Ethan Vale, she was careful to say, a human subject. But when she spoke of emotional integration, of layered, simultaneous affect states that informed one another rather than competed, the room grew quieter. This isn't about intensity, Aaron said, activating the display. Patterns of light unfolded in the air, interwoven strands rather than isolated points. Humans don't feel more. They feel relationally. Each emotion carries context from others. A Kelari diplomat leaned forward. You're suggesting humans translate emotional states internally. Yes, Aaron replied, continuously. A human science officer frowned. That sounds inefficient. Ethan spoke before he could stop himself. Sometimes it is, he said. But it also means we understand trade-offs instinctively. Loss with gain, fear with responsibility, hope with risk. Eyes turned toward him. Aaron didn't interrupt. That doesn't make us better, he added. Just adaptable. Silence followed. Then questions. Careful ones, skeptical ones, interested ones. By the end of the session, nothing had been approved, but nothing had been dismissed either. As the room emptied, Aaron remained still, watching the holo display fade. They'll need time, she said. Ethan nodded. So will we. Later, back in observation deck 4, the stars felt closer somehow. Aaron stood beside him, hands clasped, gaze unfocused. You realize, she said quietly, that even if this never becomes a program, it's already changed how I perceive my own species. He looked at her. Is that good? She considered the question. I don't know yet, she admitted. But it's honest. They stood there in silence, not touching, not needing to. The station continued forward, and somewhere between caution and possibility, a new path had opened. One neither of them could fully see yet, but both were already walking. The station entered quiet orbit 3 days later. No emergencies, no alarms, just the low, steady rhythm of systems doing exactly what they were designed to do. For Ethan, that quiet felt louder than any crisis. Too much space to think, too much room for anticipation. The message came just before the end of his shift. Command review completed. Further evaluation pending. Dr. Aaron Kale requested to continue collaboration. No approval. No rejection. A door left deliberately ajar. Ethan found Aaron where he expected her to be, observation deck 4, stars stretching endlessly beyond the glass. She stood closer to the viewport than usual, hands resting lightly against the transparent barrier, as if feeling the cold of space through it. They didn't say no, he said as he approached. No, she replied, which means they're afraid of the implications. He smiled faintly. That's usually a good sign. She turned to face him, her expression unreadable at first. Then slowly it softened. There's something I need to tell you, she said, before this becomes anything else. He nodded, okay. My people don't form bonds the way humans do, Aaron said. We collaborate, we respect, we align goals. But what I experienced with you, she paused, searching for language that didn't yet exist for her. It doesn't fit our frameworks. Ethan felt his chest tighten. And does that bother you? Yes, she said honestly, and no. She stepped closer, not quite touching, close enough that the space between them felt intentional rather than accidental. I was trained to believe emotional restraint was clarity, she continued. But what you showed me, what you are, suggests something else. That clarity can emerge from complexity. That meaning doesn't require simplification. He studied her face, the faint tension at the corners of her eyes. You don't have to change who you are because of me. I know, she said softly. That's what makes this choice mine. She extended her hand, not as a researcher, not as an empath, as herself. Ethan took it. This time the resonance didn't overwhelm. It didn't surge or collide. It settled, layers still present, still intricate but balanced. Her emotions didn't mirror his. They didn't dissolve into his either. They met him. Curiosity alongside caution. Connection alongside uncertainty. Hope restrained but undeniable. Aaron exhaled a sound that was half laugh, half disbelief. I can feel it, she said. Not just you, us, something unfinished. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. I don't need answers right now. Her eyes met his, luminous in the starlight. Neither do I. They stood together, hands joined, watching a distant star ignite briefly before collapsing back into quiet. Outside, the galaxy remained vast, indifferent, unknowable. Inside that small observation deck, something had found its shape, not complete, not defined, but real. Whatever came next